South African policeman Danny Glover is caught between his job and his community in Bopa. And Robert De Niro struggles to shield his boy from a neighborhood mobster in A Bronx Tale.
Really beautiful.
Thanks. Want some salad, Jack?
Yeah, please.
Jack, did I tell you they tore down the old lighthouse?
Oh, no. The one on the point?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that old place.
Yeah, so did we.
Macaulay Culkin plays a bad boy, a very bad boy, in The Good Son, one of 5 new movies we'll be reviewing this week on Siskel and Ebert, along with the first directing jobs by celebrated actors Robert De Niro and Morgan Freeman, and also a study of teenagers growing up way back in the mid-1970s. I'm Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune.
And I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times. Our first movie is named The Good Son, and it's a movie that inspires an obvious question, which is, why in the world was this movie made? What possible audience is there for a film starring Macaulay Culkin as a sadistic and hateful little monster and murderer? Maybe somebody somewhere thinks of this as entertainment, but I think of it as an exercise in irresponsibility by everyone connected to the project, especially the young boy's parents and managers, who should have thought twice before exposing him to such a distasteful role. The movie stars Elijah Wood as a little boy whose mother dies and whose father has to leave the country on business, so he's sent to live for a couple of weeks with the family of his cousin, played by Macaulay Culkin. And life on their main island is one life-threatening situation after another.
If I let you go, do you think you could fly?
This little kid is full of tricks. Here they're almost savaged by a killer dog. And in a later scene, Culkin will actually kill that dog before his cousin's eyes. And what about this scene? Culkin has just dropped a human dummy on the highway, causing a multiple-car traffic pileup.
Do you know what you did? Hey, come on. We did it together. You could have killed people. With your help.
Eventually, his mother figures out her son is not so good and may have been responsible for drowning his baby brother in a bathtub.
Where'd you get that?
You know where I got it? I couldn't find it after Richard's accident. Have you had it all this time?
It was mine before it was his.
And, of course, if Mom is going to make all kinds of trouble and be a bad sport, he knows how to take care of her, too. The Good Son is a reprehensible film, trading on little children in order to create sick images with no redeeming value except, I guess, to entertain, although I cannot imagine anyone being entertained by this movie. What really disturbed me were the scenes of small children in danger and the scenes in which this young man, Macaulay Culkin, is required to act out the murders of his family members, innocent bystanders, and even a dog. Macaulay Culkin has a lot of young fans, and all I can say is the movie, which is rated R, is completely inappropriate for children. And 2 of the children who should have been kept out of it are Macaulay Culkin and Elijah Wood.
You know, they're both pretty good actors.
Yes,
and
they are.
It is awful, an awful film for all the reasons that you mentioned. And then it's stupid also on its own level. For example, the dummy is thrown off, Macaulay Culkin throws the dummy off in a highway, the cars crack up. Never again is it mentioned in the investigation about the dummy. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
That's not pursued.
And the 2 kids are in full view of anybody on the highway.
In other words, it doesn't have, as stupid and as offensive as the film is, it doesn't even have a logic within its own sordid details. The ending of the film is similarly awful, where the character questions the mother's mental state, when it makes absolutely no sense whatever. Even the last line of the film is a fraud. It's a terrible film from beginning to end, and I hope you're right. I hope that kids are prevented from seeing this picture. You know, parents may not be smart enough.
A lot of kids know that Macaulay Culkin is in it, and they loved his other movies.
Yes.
And I've already gotten letters from parents saying, is this okay for my 9-year-old or my 11-year-old? The answer is No.
It's not okay for anyone. Next film, and the next film is called The Program, and it's a behind-the-scenes college football film. Kind of lame, I think, as sports films go these days. They're very smart, a lot of sports films. This one shows us pressure these kids are under in college football, getting grades, using steroids, but the treatment here is very soft. The action centers on the quarterback of a big-time school, a Heisman Trophy candidate played by Craig Sheffer, and here he's being harassed by his teammates in a bar before the season begins.
We do all the work, and you get all the pub. Too bad we ain't allowed to hit you in practice. Be fun to kick the of a Heisman Trophy candidate.
Yeah, maybe you'll get your shot in the pros, huh?
The other major figure in the story, a freshman recruit played by Omar Epps, who falls for a pretty upperclassman, Halle Berry, who's been tutoring him in English and math. He wants to study a little bit more with her, romance.
I realize how you see me now. I'm good enough to tutor. I'm good enough to go places with, but I'm not good enough to tell your father about it.
The other key character is the put-upon coach of the team, played by James Caan. The alumni are pressuring him for victories. That's why he's extra tense at halftime.
Now, the rest of you guys, you play that second half the way you did the first. This is what the rest of your season's gonna look like.
James Caan doesn't look very good in The Program, which really doesn't try very hard to be a good movie. We get a little bit of the quarterback and his drinking problem, a little bit of a cartoonish lineman on steroids, and a little bit of the black love story. It's all amateurish. The Program is a waste of time.
I'm sorry, Gene. I'm giving this at least a marginal thumbs up.
Wow.
And I'll tell you why. There were two things that I enjoyed about the movie. One thing was the fact that they really do go into details about some of the things that these people do in order to get on the field every Saturday, especially the lineman on steroids. His story really wasn't cartoonish at all. It was tragic, and especially toward the end of the film, and even the last shot of him, it's very thought-provoking. And the other reason I liked it was that I found it interesting that they took the formula of a sports movie, which is to say, will the team win the big game at the end of the movie, and did it in counterpoint with all of these horrendous human problems that are also kind of sub-dramas to that game. I found that an interesting approach.
I thought those little sub-dramas were superficial, and it does have the big game ending. I thought the football action, these days, there's so much video out, and people are so aware of what the real stuff looks like. I think you got to be extra smart. I saw another football movie recently, this week as a matter of fact, we'll review it later, in which the action was far more credible than this. I think it falls down at every single level.
Okay, when we come back, A Bronx Tale, Robert De Niro's story of growing up in the 1960s.
Don't you see how I treat that kid? I treat that kid like he's my son.
He ain't your son, he's my son.
Accept that.
I didn't give it to you. I gave it to your son. He worked for me.
That's right, my son. And I don't want my son involved in what goes on here.
That's Robert De Niro there playing an Italian-American bus driver who doesn't want the neighborhood mafia boss to be friendly with his son. And that is a scene from A Bronx Tale, which is De Niro's very impressive directing debut and the equally impressive writing and starring debut of Chaz Palminteri, who wrote the movie based on his own childhood experiences in the 60s. Palminteri plays the mobster named Sonny in this scene, who hangs on the corner and takes a liking to the film's young hero, De Niro's son, after the kid sees Sonny shoot someone and doesn't squeal.
Is it better to be loved or feared?
That's a good question. It's nice to be both, but it's very difficult. But if I had my choice, I would rather be feared.
The young hero, nicknamed C, is played at age 9 by Francis Capra and at age 17 by Lilo Brancato, and they're both very good actors. As a teenager, C becomes attracted to a black girl who goes to his high school and gets up the courage to ask her out despite the disapproval of his neighborhood and hers.
Calogero Anello?
Yeah.
Got it.
My friends call me C.
Well, I like Calogero better.
Meanwhile, C gets advice from both his father and the mobster and uses the best of both.
When you're alone late at night in bed, just you and her under the covers, that's all that matters, C. You got to do what your heart tells you to do.
In a less original movie, the ending would probably be a violent showdown between the father and the mobster fighting over the boy, but this is a much more original film based on a one-man show that Chaz Palminteri wrote out of his own life and acted on stage in New York and Los Angeles, and the truth in it is much more complex. The movie is about learning to be your own person and standing up for what you think is right and realizing, in Sonny the Gangster's words, that you better care about yourself because nobody else really cares. A Bronx Tale is a very special movie, truthful, painful, and almost poetic at times, and a very impressive directing debut for De Niro.
I liked the film, too. At first, I thought, oh, boy, here we go again. It's back into the New York streets with De Niro, and he's playing it safe because these are the stories, obviously, that he and Martin Scorsese created and were so powerful. And then the film began to work on me later on, principally because I liked the character of this Chaz Palminteri and the young actors who played him. And then it got me when the interracial love story kicked in, because then I thought they were taking it to at least new turf. We've seen it in modern day, but this is the 60s when this was a very risky thing that they were both engaging in, and there's some real tension develops, and so I like the film too. Maybe not as much as you, but I liked it.
Another thing I liked about it is so frequently Italian Americans are portrayed in the movies as gangsters. And here what you have is an Italian-American home with a bus driver.
Yeah.
De Niro has a wonderful speech. He says the real heroes
yes, I agree.
are the
I like
guys
that
who
speech.
get up every morning and go out there and work and earn a living and support their family. And then there's another interesting speech.
And he says, let's see if that guy, the mobster, can do that. That would be a real tough thing.
But on the other hand, the mobster isn't a bad guy either. And he has a nice speech about the kinds of people who feel they have to carry guns in order to get their way. And it's interesting how both of these people are mentoring this young boy, and he gets the good out of these two totally different approaches. I think that's the original twist here, instead of making them into adversaries.
Coming up next, Danny Glover's latest, a South African drama called Bopa, directed by Morgan Freeman.
Immediately, or we will be forced to take action.
No more Africans! No more Africans! No more Africans!
That's Danny Glover as a South African policeman on the horns of a dilemma in Bopa, which is a Zulu word meaning arrest and detain. And Glover will have to deal with the problem of arresting his own son, who is protesting the racist treatment of blacks in South Africa of a decade ago. First, we meet Glover as an instructor of new African recruits in the police force. He's proud, he tells them, to be a policeman.
And as a member of the SAP, you will have the intelligence of 100 men.
But there's tension at home. Glover's wife, Alfre Woodard, objects to his preoccupation with his job.
Just calm down.
I don't want to calm down, Mika. This isn't supposed to happen to me.
It's my job.
I don't care about your job. I care about my life. I care about my family.
And then there's his son, played by Maynard Eziashi, who objects to the way Dad dominates the family.
All my life, you decide. You push me. I have my own plans.
The centerpiece of the film, which we can easily anticipate and takes a long time getting around to, is when Glover's son falls in with protesters and runs afoul of Glover's boss, played as a super meanie by Malcolm McDowell.
What does the law allow us to do with terrorists?
Detention, sir.
What kind of detention?
Indefinite detention.
Bopa has its heart in the right place, but most movies about South Africa do. The problem is it doesn't take us anywhere fresh. It's not a bad film, as directed by Morgan Freeman. It's just decent, and that's all I found in it.
Boy, I liked it a whole lot more than that, Gene, and I think it does take us to some place that's brand new, and that is Black South Africa, because most of the films about South Africa have seen the problems down there through white eyes. Donald Sutherland's yard man disappears, or Kevin Kline's friend Stephen Biko is killed and Kline has to escape from the country, things like this. In this film, you see essentially the black society and their problems, and here is a middle class, by black standards, by African standards, man who has a nice house with a refrigerator and two bedrooms, and he likes his job and he's proud of it, and he hasn't been paying attention to the fact that his society has been swept right away into a different direction.
I guess what I'm saying is, seeing it today, okay, I realize the film is set in 1980, starts in 1980. If I had seen this film maybe in 1980, I would have thought that this was on the cutting edge. Now I think the issues are so obvious that I think that to see this drama in 1993 and have it come out now makes it like a story. I'm racing ahead, so that really the stories of South Africa that I'm interested in are the ones about how do we deal with now when we know what's wrong. That's the more exciting thing.
We can certainly use a film like that, but it doesn't make this a bad film. And I think, oddly enough, that a great many people don't understand at all what's going on in South Africa. They know that the blacks and the whites are mad at each other, and they don't really know why, and they don't understand what society is like down there or any of these issues. And so I think maybe you're being unfair to the film.
Well, I didn't say it was bad. I just said I didn't think it was good. How's that? It's the
Okay,
difference. There's a distinction.
High-powered criticism.
Okay.
When we come back, some Texas teenagers live through the long last night of the school year. Dazed and Confused is next. And Confused after the Led Zeppelin song, and it's sort of an updating of American Graffiti for the 1970s, remembering a high school generation that sometimes did indeed feel dazed and confused by an American society post-Vietnam that no longer seemed, as it did in the 1950s and early 60s, perfect for teenagers. The movie ambles through one long day and night, the last day of school in a small Texas town where kids like this one, played by Matthew McConaughey, graduated years ago and are still aimlessly hanging around.
There's a new fiesta in the making as we speak. It's out at the Moon Tower. Full kegs. Everybody's gonna be there. You ought to go.
With a long summer stretching before them, the kids drink beer and smoke pot and trade deep but elusive truths, which are perfectly heard in the dialogue by Richard Linklater, who also directed the film.
Absolutely, George Tope Weed. Are you kidding me, man? He grew fields of that stuff, man. That's what I'm talking about. Fields.
He grew that up in Mount Vernon, man.
Mount Vernon, man, he grew it all over the country, man. He had people growing it all over the country, you know? The whole country back then was getting hot. Let me tell you, man, because he knew. He was on to something, man. He knew that it would be a good cash crop for the southern states, man.
Like all teenagers everywhere, they have legends from out of the past, also about teenagers.
This place used to be off limits, man, because some drunk freshman fell off. He went right down the middle, smacking his head on every beam, man. I hear it doesn't hurt after the first couple, though. Autopsy said he had one beer, man. How many did you have?
Dazed and Confused is the second feature by Richard Linklater, who also made a very interesting movie 2 years ago named Slacker, a cross-section of off-campus life in Austin, Texas. This new film is so well written and acted, it's almost like anthropology. It knows exactly how high school kids of 15 or 20 years ago talked, dressed, thought, and behaved. There's no big plot to get in the way because what the movie wants to do is suggest the kind of world they're entering and the sometimes dazed, sometimes confused, sometimes hopeful, and sometimes promising people that they are.
I like the film on that basis, too. It took me a while, though, to get into this picture. At first, I was thinking, you know, this is really disgusting behavior. A lot of the rites of getting into sororities and fraternities and all that stuff.
All the seniors have to paddle the juniors.
It was very cruel, and I didn't understand where the film's attitude toward it. And he doesn't declare his attitude very clearly, I think, until later on, where we do see that these kids are inheriting rights that were not of their making. They really are dazed. They think they're supposed to go through with this. Yeah. And it did seem very sad. Their lives seemed very, very sad. And when I felt that in the picture, I felt it did have some humanity in it and heart in it. And then I got into the picture and enjoyed it.
Now, you know, of course, that high school fraternities do things like this.
Yes, I know they do. And it's awful. And they're doing it, they're acting out some very old, unappealing attitudes in life in this country.
Yes, they are, and they don't really have any myths of their own. I mean, if you go back to American Graffiti, those kids had their cars, they had rock and roll, which was terrific. They had the blonde at the end of the block. They had the drive-in.
Well, it was upbeat.
They had the future. They were and then, of course, after American Graffiti came Vietnam, and then after Vietnam came Dazed and Confused, and I think that's how you get the balance here.
It's a good film. Coming up next, our video pick of the week, a better Macaulay Culkin film than The Good Son. It would be harder to find one word.
Plaza, offering the finest in luxury service in Southern California style, adjacent to Beverly Hills on LA's fashionable west side, the Century Plaza Hotel and Tower.
Now it's time for our video pick of the week, and I'm going to try and give parents and kids an alternative to The Good Son if you're interested in Macaulay Culkin. To his and his parents' credit, Macaulay Culkin is determined not just to be a child comic star. After the stunning success of Home Alone, he appeared in a serious and very fine drama called My Girl, in which he has a sweet friendship with a neighbor girl played by Anna Klumsky.
Have you ever kissed anyone? Like they do on TV? Mm-hmm. No. Well, maybe we should. Just to see what's the big deal.
A surprising thing happens to Macaulay Culkin in this movie, and I was genuinely pleased to see him take on this script. It suggested that the Home Alone pictures were just a beginning for him. The Good Son, however, is what he's come out recently. It's rated R. There's no reason to see it, but if your kids are clamoring for a Culkin movie, then rent My Girl instead. It's our video pick of the week. Now let's recap the movies we reviewed on this program. 2 thumbs down, way down for The Good Son, a brutal exercise in terror that makes absolutely no sense. It's one of the year's worst films. A split vote for The Program. I thought it was a trivial college football movie that didn't dig deeply into any of its characters, Roger enjoyed it. He thought a couple of the small stories were worth watching. 2 thumbs up for A Bronx Tale, Robert De Niro's first directing job, a good, if familiar, Italian-American street story here, which Roger liked even more than I did. A split vote on Bopah with Danny Glover as a South African policeman torn apart upholding racist laws. Roger liked it, I found it predictable. And finally, 2 thumbs up for Dazed and Confused, the quirky indictment of teenagers in the mid-70s acting out demeaning rites of passage.
Now, you know, we've recommended a lot of movies on this show and last week's show, and I just came back from the Toronto Film Festival, and it's just suddenly become my impression that this is a great autumn, and it's been a good year. So all of a sudden...
They're making more films. The studios are all making more films because there's so many different ways they can make money off of movies these days, so they're just rushing out lots of pictures, and they're hitting a lot of hits.
So the news is often very good these days. That's it for this week. Next week, we'll be back with reviews of more new movies, including Malice, a tale of murder and betrayal starring Alec Baldwin, Nicole Kidman, and Bill Pullman. And For Love or Money, starring Michael J. Fox as a hotel official who wants both his own hotel and Gabrielle Anwar. That's next week, and until then, the balcony is closed.